They say some rulers are born to reign, others to suffer, and a rare few to curse the very earth they walk upon. This is the story of one such queen, the woman who would not die. But before I begin, let me warn you, this tale is not for the faint-hearted. If you love haunting African folk tales that twist your bones and linger in your dreams, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because many more shadows wait to be told. In the heart of the ancient land of Oduro, where baobabs spread their roots like fingers and rivers glittered like snakes beneath the sun, there lived Queen Nakeira. Her reign began with promise. She was young, beautiful, and wise beyond her years. The people sang her name in markets, praised her fairness in judgments, and offered her libations at festivals as though she were already one with the ancestors. But fate had written her story in darker ink. For Nakeira feared death more than she loved life. She listened not to the elders, who reminded her that life's circle is broken without death, but to whispers of forbidden charms. They said she sought counsel from a shadow priest in the forest, a man whose face was always hidden by smoke. What bargain she struck with him, no one knew. But from the day she returned, her eyes held a gleam that unsettled even the bravest warriors. The first time she died, it was of fever. Her body burned, her lips cracked, and the women of the palace wept as they dressed her in white cloth and laid her on a mat of woven reeds. They buried her beneath the sacred tree, drums echoing through the night. But 3 days later, she walked back into the village, her garments still scented with earth, her eyes cold and distant. The people fell to their knees, calling her blessed of the gods. The second time, she drowned. The river swept her away, her cries swallowed by the current. They found her body days later, bloated and pale, and laid her to rest with chance. Yet by the next moon she appeared at the palace gates, dry and untouched, as though the water had only kissed her skin. Some rejoiced, believing the ancestors had chosen to keep her among them. Others whispered of things unnatural. By her third death, there was no doubt. A sickness struck the kingdom, and she succumbed like many others. They sealed her in the tombs with herbs and oils, yet at dawn she sat again upon her throne, her smile sharper than before. This time, no one cheered. Mothers clutched their children, and even the elders could not explain what they witnessed. And so the land began to change. Where once festivals roared with drums, silence fell. Where once the earth yielded yams thick as thighs, the soil turned bitter. Where once rivers flowed sweet, the waters grew thin and sour. It was as though the kingdom itself strained under a weight it was never meant to bear. A queen who refused to die. It began with sounds. At first faint, scratches, murmurs, from the royal cemetery. Then louder. Villagers claimed they heard voices at night calling from beneath the earth, not cries of pain, but whispers, like conversations. Some swore they heard their dead relatives among the voices, calling their names, asking to be let out. Others said the voices begged them to stop her, but no one dared speak her name aloud. The bravest youths ventured to the burial grounds one moonless night. They returned pale, swearing that the soil shifted as though something beneath was breathing. They left the next day, fleeing Oduro forever. Her fourth death came during the festival of rain, when the people danced to summon clouds. She joined the procession as she had always done. But when the drummers struck the final beat, lightning speared from the sky and struck her where she stood. The crowd screamed as her body collapsed in fire and smoke. They thought the gods themselves had ended her reign. But at dawn, she appeared in the palace gates, her garments scorched but her skin untouched. The smell of smoke still clung to her, and when she opened her mouth to speak, ash spilled out instead of words. From then on, the people stopped celebrating the festivals. They feared the gods no longer listened, only she did. Seasons turned bitter. Yams shrank in the soil, rivers ran low, and cattle birthed weak calves that died before sunrise. Elders said the land itself was starving, for it was never meant to hold one who refused to die. Strange plagues followed. Children were born with hollow eyes, or without tongues, and some without faces at all. These infants wailed without sound, their cries trapped inside their throats. The midwives whispered that the queen's curse had seeped into the wombs of the women. Her fifth death was rebellion. A group of warriors, driven by hunger and grief, stormed the palace one night. They dragged her into the courtyard, binding her arms with ropes thick as a man's wrist. They struck her down with spears, their blades piercing her chest. She did not resist, only smiled as they drove iron into her flesh. Her body was burned, her ashes scattered into the river. The people rejoiced. They sang songs of freedom late into the night, daring once more to believe that dawn would bring peace. But when morning came, the river ran black. Fish floated belly up, their scales eaten away by something unseen. From the water's edge, footprints rose out of the ash and led back toward the palace. By midday, she was seated on her throne again. The ropes still hung from her arms, burnt and smoking, but her body was whole. Her smile was wider now, as though every death fed her with something more. The palace, once alive with servants, musicians, and courtiers, grew hollow. Those who served her vanished. Some said they fled, others swore they saw them wandering the palace grounds at night, their eyes empty, their steps unsteady, as if sleepwalking forever. Travelers who passed near Oduro carried tales. They claimed that when the moon was full, figures could be seen dancing inside the palace courtyard, but no music played. Those who watched too long said the figures would stop and turn their heads toward them, faces pale and wrong. The strangest omen came from the children. Each year, fewer were born alive. Some arrived with skin too cold, others without a heartbeat but with eyes wide open, staring. One midwife, old enough to remember when Oduro thrived, swore that one infant whispered words in her ear before it died. She will not stop. Parents grew desperate. Some fled the kingdom. Others tried to hide their newborns in the forest, but the children always returned, left at their doorsteps, no matter how far they had been carried. It was as though the land itself refused to let anyone escape. When famine worsened, the people buried her beneath the sacred tree of Oduro, its roots older than memory. They carved sigils into the bark, poured blood into the earth, and sealed her with 7 chains of iron. The tree withered overnight. Its leaves fell like ash, its trunk cracked open, and from the hollow she emerged again. Her skin had begun to change. It shimmered like polished stone, smooth and unnatural. Her eyes glowed faintly, twin embers in the dark. When she spoke, her voice was no longer her own. It was layered, like many voices speaking at once, the voices of those who had been buried in Oduro and could not rest. Decades passed, though the queen's face never altered. Children grew old, old ones died, but she remained untouched. The people stopped burying their dead. They feared that the earth itself had been corrupted by her curse. Corpses were left in the open fields, where vultures circled endlessly, too full to eat but unwilling to leave. The kingdom was a shadow of itself. Fields lay barren, huts crumbled, laughter was forgotten. Only the queen endured, sitting on her throne of silence, her shadow stretching across the land. The elders, desperate, gathered in secret one last time. They carried charms older than the kingdom, relics wrapped in animal skin. They found her asleep upon her throne. Or so it seemed. Her eyes were closed, but her shadow writhed like snakes. They struck her with spears tipped in sacred bone, and for the first time, she screamed. The sound was like glass shattering, like children crying, like the earth itself splitting open. Her body crumbled into dust. The elders fell to their knees, weeping with relief. But then, the palace shook. From the dust, voices rose. Thousands of them. Some wept, some laughed, some whispered the names of the living. The dust thickened, swirling into a storm, until it shaped itself once more into the queen. Her face was gone, smoothed into nothing, a blank mask. Yet her voice thundered across the kingdom, "You cannot kill what you have already buried." That night, The graves split open. Bones clawed free, dragging soil with them. Skulls cracked against the moonless sky, jaws opening in silent screams. Villagers woke to find their ancestors standing at their doors, hollow-eyed, mouths moving without sound. Fields filled with figures of bone and soil, whispering fragments of lives long gone. Children screamed as skeletal hands tapped on their walls. The queen walked among them, her faceless head tilting, her arms outstretched as though gathering them into her fold. The people fled. Some ran into the forests, only to hear footsteps behind them, voices calling their names in the voices of their dead parents or children. Others tried to cross the rivers, but the waters rose, black and thick, carrying bones downstream. The palace itself split in two. The throne crumbled into ash, but the queen stood unshaken. Her shadow stretched across the ruins, swallowing torches, swallowing even the moonlight. Elders tried once more to bind her with chants, but their words twisted in their mouths, choking them until they fell silent forever. The curse spread to the youngest. Children who had once laughed now sat in silence, eyes empty, lips stitched shut by unseen hands. At night, these children wandered into the fields, standing in rows as though awaiting command. When the queen appeared among them, they followed without question, their tiny feet padding softly in the dirt. It was said that the faceless queen had taken their voices to weave her own, adding layer upon layer to the chorus that filled her throat. At last, the surviving villagers gathered. Starvation and fear had hollowed them, but desperation gave them courage. They marched to the ruins of the palace, carrying torches, drums, and every relic of the ancestors they still possessed. The drummers struck a rhythm not of joy, but of defiance, a beat meant to wake the gods themselves. The queen appeared in the flames' glow. Her faceless head turned toward them, her shadow bending across the earth like a net. The dead followed at her heels, a tide of bones and whispers. The people shouted their names into the night. Not hers, not the queen's, but their own names, over and over. They believed that if names tethered souls, then perhaps calling their own would anchor them, keep them from being swallowed by her curse. The queen tilted her head, listening. For a moment, the whispers of the dead faltered. For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then she spoke. Her voice was the sound of countless mouths, countless graves opening at once. Your names belong to me. And with that, the torches flickered, the drums split, and the dead surged forward. When dawn finally came, it found no kingdom. Oduro was gone. The huts, the fields, the palace, everything had been swallowed by the earth or reduced to ash. Only the skeleton of the sacred baobab stood, its roots stretched like claws into the empty soil. Travelers who later came upon the land saw nothing living, only cracked earth and stones. Yet when the wind blew, they swore they heard voices, thousands of them, whispering in unison. Some claimed they heard their own names carried in that wind, though they had never stepped foot in Oduro. The kingdom had not simply fallen. It had been erased. A few survivors escaped. Their faces were hollow, their eyes shadowed, their voices trembling. They carried no possessions, no children, no songs. Wherever they settled, they brought silence with them. They refused to speak of Oduro. If asked, they only shook their heads, as though even the memory was dangerous to share. But at night, some could be heard whispering in their sleep, always the same, "She is still watching. She is still walking." In villages that gave them shelter, strange things followed. Chickens vanished, goats were found bleached white, and children sometimes woke screaming, clutching their throats as though a hand had tried to steal their voices. And so, those who survived Oduro were never welcomed for long. They became wanderers, carrying the shadow of their queen wherever they went. Generations passed, and Oduro became less of a memory and more of a warning. Storytellers carried the tale from fire to fire, reshaping it but never losing its essence. They said the queen still roamed, her faceless head turning toward any village that forgot to honor its dead. They said she listened for names unspoken at funerals, for ancestors neglected, for graves untended. Some claimed she appeared at crossroads in the deep of night, surrounded by children without voices. Others swore she could be seen by rivers, gazing at her reflection in water that refused to ripple. The land where Oduro once stood grew into a forbidden place. Hunters avoided it, traders walked miles around it, and no one dared cut wood from its trees. They said even birds would not fly overhead, for the air itself was too heavy with silence. From this tale, one truth spread across the land. A name is not just a sound. It is a soul's tether. People learned never to bury their dead without speaking names, without singing them into memory. They poured libations and carved marks in wood and stone. They whispered to the children, "Remember who came before you, for if you forget, the dead may rise to remind you." The story of Oduro became a warning that spread far beyond its borders. And in every telling, the lesson was the same. To forget the dead is to invite them back among the living. Even now, they say, the Queen's shadow still lingers. Some nights, when the wind blows across the grasslands, people hear a sound like anklets clinking softly in the distance. Some hear whispers, faint but insistent, calling their names from the dark. No one knows if it is memory, or if the Queen herself still walks, faceless and endless, searching for those who dare let their ancestors be forgotten. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself this. If you woke to hear your name whispered by a voice with no mouth, would you answer? Or would you pray that silence is enough to save you? From the ashes of Oduro, one truth endures. Death is not the end when memory is denied. Power without humility becomes a curse upon all. To honor the dead is to protect the living. The Queen would not die because her people stopped speaking, stopped remembering, stopped honoring the path between worlds. And so her curse became endless, because silence, too, can kill. Remember this tale, for it is not just about a queen or a kingdom long lost. It is about us all. For the ground remembers. The ancestors listen. And names, once spoken, never fade. If this story has chilled your bones and made you glance twice into the dark corners of your room, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel for more haunting African folktales. Share this tale with someone who dares to listen, and remember, stories like these survive only when they are spoken. Until next time, watch the shadows, for they may be watching you.